In this video, I will read out the text of the short story The Shroud by Munshi Premchand. This video has two parts in itself. At the first segment, I will read out the English version of this short story, and at the second segment, the Bengali version. So, let's have the essence of this text together. At the door of the hut, father and son sat silently by a burnt out fire. Inside, the son's young wife, Budhia, lay in labor, writhing with pain, and from time to time, such a heart-rending scream emerged from her lips that they both pressed their hands to their hearts. It was a winter night. Everything was drowned in desolation. The whole village had been absorbed into the darkness. Ghisu said, "It seems she won't live. She's been writhing in pain the whole day. Go on, see how she is." Madhav says in a pained tone, "If she is going to die, then why she doesn't go ahead and die? What's the use of going to see? You are pretty hard-hearted. You have enjoyed life with her for a whole year. Such faithlessness to her. Well, I can't stand to see her writhing and thrashing around." It was a family of chamars and notorious in the whole village. If Ghisu worked for one day, then he rested for 3. Madhav was such a slacker that if he worked for an hour, then he smoked his chillum for an hour. Thus, nobody hired them on. If there was even a handful of grain in the house, they both were working. When they'd fasted for a couple of days, then Ghisu climbed trees and broke off branches, and Madhav sold the wood in the market. And as long as the money lasted, they both spent their time wandering idly around. When their hunger grew intense, they again broke up branches or looked for some work. There was no shortage of work in the village. It was a village of farmers. For a hard-working man, there were 50 jobs, but people only sent for those to when they were forced to content themselves with getting out of 2 men the work of 1. If only the 2 had been ascetics, then they wouldn't have needed any exercises in self-discipline to achieve contentment and patience. This was their very nature. Theirs was a strange life. Except for 2 or 3 clay pots, they had no goods at all in the house. Covering their nakedness with torn rags, free from the cares of the world, laden with debt. They suffered abuse, they suffered blows too, but not grief. They were so poor that without the smallest hope of repayment, people used to lend them something or other. When peas or potatoes were in season, they would dig up peas or potatoes from the fields and roast and eat them, or break up 5 or 10 stalks of sugarcane and suck them at night. Ghisu had spent 60 years of his life in this pious manner, and Madhav, like a dutiful son, was following in his father's footsteps, or rather was making his name even more radiant. This time too, both were seated by the fire, roasting potatoes that they had dug up from somebody's field. Ghisu's wife had passed away long ago. Madhav's marriage had taken place the year before. Since this woman had come, she had laid the foundations of civilization in the family. Grinding grain, cutting grass, she arranged for a couple of pounds of flour and kept filling the stomachs of those 2 shameless ones. After the After she came, they both grew even more lazy and indolent. Indeed, they even began to swagger a bit. If somebody sent for them to work, then, with splendid indifference, they demanded double wages. That woman was dying today in childbirth, and these two were perhaps waiting for her to die, so they could sleep in peace. Pulling out a potato and peeling it, Gisu said, "Go see what shape she is in. We will have the fuss over a ghost witch. What else? And here even the exorcist demands a rupee. From whose house would we get one?" Madhav suspected that if he went into the hut, Gisu would finish up most of the potatoes. He said, "I am afraid to go in." "What are you afraid of? I am here after all." "Then you go and see, all right?" "When my wife died, for 3 days I never even left her side, and then won't she be ashamed in front of me? I have never seen her face, and today I should see her naked body. She won't even have bodily ease. If she sees me, she won't be able to thrash around freely. I am thinking, if a child is born, what then? Dried ginger, brown sugar, oil, there's nothing at all in the house. Everything will come. If Bhagavan gives a child, those people who now aren't giving a paisa will send for us and give us things. I have had 9 sons. There was never anything in the house, but this is how we managed every time. A society in which those who labored night and day were not in much better shape than these two. A society in which, compared to the peasants, those who knew how to exploit the peasants' weaknesses were much better off. In such a society, the birth of this kind of mentality was no cause for surprise. We will say that compared to the peasants, Ghisu was more insightful, and instead of joining the mindless group of peasants, he had joined the group of clever, scheming tricksters. Though indeed he wasn't skillful in following the rules and customs of the tricksters. Thus, while other members of his group became chief and headmen of villages, at him the whole village waved its finger, but still he did have the consolation that he was in bad shape. At least he wasn't forced to do the back-breaking labor of the peasants, and others didn't take improper advantage of his simplicity and voicelessness. Pulling out the potatoes, they both began to eat them burning hot. They had eaten nothing since the day before. They were too impatient to wait till the potatoes cooled. Both burned their tongues repeatedly. When the potatoes were peeled, their outer parts didn't seem so extremely hot, but the moment the teeth bit into them, the inner part burned the tongue and throat and roof of the mouth. Rather than keep that ember in the mouth, it was better to send it quickly along inward, where there was plenty of equipment for cooling it down. So they both swallowed very fast, although the attempt brought tears to their eyes. Then Gisu remembered a landowner's wedding procession, in which he had taken part 20 years before. The repletion that had been vouchsafed to him in that feast was a memorable event in his life, and even today its memory was fresh. He said, "I'll never forget that feast. Never since then have I had the kind of food or such a full stomach." The girl's family fed puris to everyone, as much as they wanted. Great and small, everyone ate puris. Once, made with real ghee, chutney, raita, three kinds of green vegetables, a flavorful stew, yogurt, chutney, sweets. How can I tell you now what relish there was in the feast? There was no limit. Whatever thing you want, just ask. And however much you want, eat. People ate so much that nobody could even drink any water. And there the servers were setting hot, round, sweet smelling pastries before you. You refuse, saying you don't want it. You push away the tray with your hand, but that's how they are. They just keep on giving it. And when everybody had wiped their mouths, then everybody got a pan as well. But how could I be in any shape for a pan? I couldn't stand up. I just staggered up and lay down on my blanket. He had a heart as big as the ocean, that landowner. Enjoying the story of these grand festivities, Madhav said, if only somebody would give us such a feast now. As if anybody would feast anybody now? That was a different time. Now everybody thinks about economy. Don't spend money on weddings, don't spend money on religious festivals. Ask them, what's this saving of the poor people's wealth? There's no lack of saving. But when it comes to spending, they think about economy. You must have eaten 20 or so puris. I ate more than 20. I would have eaten a 50. I couldn't have eaten less than 50. I was hale and hearty. You are not half of what I was. After eating, they both drank some water, covered themselves with their dhotis, curled up, and went to sleep, right there by the fire, as if two gigantic serpents lay coiled there. And Burhia was still mourning. In the morning, when Madhav went into the hut and looked, his wife had grown cold. Flies were buzzing on her face, her stony eyes had rolled upward, her whole body was covered with dust, in her stomach the baby had died. Madhav came running to Kisu. Then they both together began loudly lamenting and beating their breasts. When the neighbors heard the weeping and wailing, they came running, and following the ancient custom, they began to console the bereaved. But this wasn't the occasion for an excessive show of grief. They had no worry about the shroud and the wood. Money was as scarce in their house as meat in a raptor's nest. Father and son went weeping to the village landlord. He hated the very sight of their faces. A number of times he had beaten them with his own hands for theft or for not coming to work as they had promised. He asked, "What is it, Gisua? Why do you weep? Nowadays we don't even see you around. It seems that you no longer want to live in the village." Gisua fell prostrate on the ground and said with tear-filled eyes, "Master, I am in great trouble. Madhav's wife passed away last night. All day she was writhing in pain. Master, we too sat by her bed till midnight. Whatever medicines we could give her, we did, but she slipped away. Now we have no one to care for us. Master, we are devastated. Our house is destroyed. I am your slave. Now, who but you will take care of our final rites? Whatever money we had at hand was used up on medicines. If the master will show mercy, then she will have the proper rights. To whose door should I come except yours?"